At our wedding reception, he clinked his glass and laughed. Let's be clear, Lila will never touch my money. Guests chuckled awkwardly. I felt my face burn. Then someone stood up and said, actually, that's not how this works. My name is Brianna Collins and I'm 34 years old. I work as a public elementary school teacher. Nothing glamorous, just long hours, tight budgets, and kids who need someone to believe in them. I grew up middle class, raised by a single mom who taught me to stretch every dollar. When I met Daniel, he came from money, family investments, trust funds, country club dinners. His parents never said I wasn't good enough, but they didn't have to. I paid my own bills, bought my own car, and never asked Daniel for a dime. Still, there were jokes about my salary, my apartment, my simple taste. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. I had discipline, I had patience, and I had receipts. What they saw as small was actually strategy. If you've ever been judged because of your paycheck or background, hit that subscribe button. I know what it's like to smile through those quiet insults. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated? Click hype if you believe quiet strength is still strength. Let's keep going. The wedding reception was at a modest banquet hall. Daniel's parents insisted on upgrading on their dime. Everything felt staged, rehearsed, like a performance I hadn't auditioned for. The chandeliers glittered overhead, casting sharp shadows across linen tablecloths that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I was standing beside Daniel when he raised his champagne glass for the toast. His smile was confident, almost too bright, the kind of smile that says he'd already won. I love Brianna, but let's be honest, what's mine is mine. She'll never have to worry about managing real money. The room erupted in laughter. His father slapped the table, grinning wide. His mother nodded approvingly, her pearl necklace catching the light like tiny spotlights on her satisfaction. I tried to laugh it off, but my throat felt tight, my chest heavy. I leaned toward him and whispered, "Why would you say that?" He didn't even look at me. Under his breath, he muttered, "Relax. Everyone knows you're not with me for the money." My stomach twisted into knots. Humiliation washed over me in waves, hot and relentless. Then Daniel continued, still grinning at the crowd like he was delivering the punchline of the century. "That's why we have a prenup, just to keep things clean." The guests started whispering, heads turning to each other. I froze. My hands went cold. I had never been told about a finalized prenup. Suddenly, an older man in a dark suit stood up from the back of the room. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the murmurs. "Daniel, before you finish that toast, I've been instructed to deliver something." He held up a sealed envelope. Daniel's smile faltered, confusion flickering across his face. His parents went pale, their expressions shifting from smug satisfaction to something close to fear. The room went completely silent. 2 weeks before the wedding, Daniel had shoved a stack of papers across the kitchen table. "It's standard, don't make this weird," he'd said, barely looking up from his phone. I asked if I could review it carefully, maybe have someone look it over. His mother called me suspicious. She said I was acting like I didn't trust their family, like I was looking for problems where there weren't any. The pressure was suffocating, but I signed the documents. Only after making my own quiet arrangements, though. Then came the house hunting. Daniel started looking at properties without me, coming home with brochures and mortgage estimates I was never shown. When I asked to join him, he waved me off dismissively. "I'll handle the mortgage. It's not really your lane." His father chimed in at dinner one night, smirking over his wine glass like he'd just made the world's cleverest observation. "Teachers should stick to grading papers." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I smiled politely, nodded, played the role they expected, but inside, something was shifting, hardening. At a family dinner a month later, Daniel made another joke. His cousins were there, everyone dressed in designer clothes I couldn't afford on 3 months' salary. "If we ever divorce, she'll walk away with lesson plans." He laughed, like it was the funniest thing he'd ever thought of. Everyone joined in, their laughter echoing off the walls. I felt myself shrinking in that chair, staring down at my plate, wishing I could disappear. But that night, I stopped defending myself out loud. I stopped trying to prove I belonged in their world. Instead, I started preparing. I began documenting every dismissive comment, every conversation where I was excluded from decisions that affected my future. I realized this wasn't love. This was control, dressed up in expensive suits and wrapped in condescending smiles. And I wasn't going to accept it. What they didn't know was I never signed anything blindly. Before signing the prenup, I had it reviewed by an independent attorney who owed me nothing and had no reason to lie. I insisted on a clause Daniel barely skimmed, something about full financial disclosure. I had a plan they never saw coming, one I built quietly while they laughed at my paycheck. Over months, I'd quietly saved emails where Daniel admitted to hidden investment accounts, bragging to friends about money his family kept offshore. I kept screenshots of text messages about transfers that never appeared on any documents I was shown. The most damning evidence? I had proof Daniel hadn't disclosed major assets before drafting the prenup, which legally made parts of it invalid. I wasn't trying to take his money. I didn't want what wasn't mine. I was protecting myself from being cornered, from being trapped in a marriage where I had no voice and no power. They thought I was naive, just a simple teacher who didn't understand how wealth worked. They didn't realize I was building a case brick by brick. Months before the wedding, I'd consulted an old family lawyer who once handled Daniel's grandfather's estate. His name was Mr. Hoffman. He was stern but fair, the kind of man who respected transparency above loyalty. I told him everything, laying out documents and messages across his desk. He reviewed the prenup carefully and shook his head slowly, looking at me over his reading glasses. I asked him to attend the wedding. He agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, Daniel's family grew more arrogant as the wedding approached. They believed the prenup guaranteed control, that they'd successfully locked me into place. At the rehearsal dinner, his mother stood and raised her glass high. "Welcome to a life you could never have imagined," she said, looking directly at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I smiled calmly back, my face a perfect mask. Mr. Hoffman sat in the back row, the envelope sealed in his briefcase, waiting. Tension built as guests began to sense something was off, whispers starting in corners. Daniel assumed he had already won. He thought the toast would be the final word, the closing statement on who had power in this relationship. The room was still silent when Mr. Hoffman stepped forward. His footsteps echoed on the polished floor, each one deliberate. "Daniel, before you celebrate financial independence, we need to address disclosure." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like a wave. He opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw. He pulled out copies of undisclosed investment accounts, holding them up for all to see. Gasps spread across the room. Mr. Hoffman's voice was steady, professional. "Failure to disclose assets voids the prenup under state law." Daniel's face went red, veins visible at his temples. He stammered, "That's private." Mr. Hoffman didn't flinch, didn't waver. "It was supposed to be shared with your wife." I finally spoke, my voice calm and clear, stronger than I'd felt in months. "You wanted everyone to know I'd never touch your money. Funny thing is, legally, I already could." The silence was deafening, suffocating. Daniel's father stood up, trying to interrupt, his face purple with rage. Mr. Hoffman held up a hand calmly. "This documentation has already been filed for record." The power dynamic flipped in an instant, like a switch being thrown. Guests started whispering, but not about my income anymore. They were talking about dishonesty, about arrogance, about a man who'd humiliated his bride publicly and gotten exposed for getting caught. Daniel looked exposed, smaller than he'd ever seemed before, shrinking under the weight of dozens of staring eyes. I slowly removed my ring and set it on the table with a soft click. "Marriage isn't about control, and I won't start my life being humiliated." I turned and walked away, my heels clicking steadily on the floor. Not defeated, steady. The wedding ended early. Guests left in stunned silence, some avoiding eye contact with Daniel's family entirely. His parents scrambled to contain the embarrassment, pulling him aside into hushed, frantic conversations that only made them look more desperate. I filed to formally dissolve the marriage before it legally began. I kept my dignity and my legal leverage. The next week, I returned to my classroom like nothing had happened. My students greeted me with handmade cards that said, "Welcome back, Miss Collins," in crayon. I realized then that wealth isn't numbers in an account, it's self-respect. It's knowing when to walk away. He thought money was power, but the real power was knowing my worth and refusing to let anyone price it. If you've ever been humiliated about money in front of others, you know how deeply that cuts. Has someone tried to make you feel small because of your income or background? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it. Subscribe to stand with people who refuse financial intimidation. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Did this story hit home? Let me know by liking the video and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Click hype to help this story find others who felt the same kind of public humiliation. Your support makes a huge difference, and I'm grateful you're here listening.